You're now live.
Okay, thank you. Well, it's now 7 o'clock, so we'll call the April 21st, 2020 County Board meeting to order. And we will start with the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, we'll have the clerk call the roll.
Supervisor Johnson,
Brian, you're muted.
Here.
Chairman Bartlett, Supervisor Headland,
Here.
Supervisor Score,
Here.
Supervisor Steen,
Here.
Supervisor Zons,
Here.
Supervisor Gary Bjork,
Here.
Supervisor Mabes,
Here.
Supervisor Quinn,
Here.
Supervisor Rogers,
Here.
Supervisor Anderson,
Here.
Supervisor Kinnear,
Here.
Supervisor Crumry,
Here.
Supervisor Calabrese,
Here.
Supervisor Keeter,
Here.
Supervisor Vogel,
Here.
Supervisor McCullough,
Here.
Supervisor Story,
Here.
Supervisor Vandermeulen,
Here.
Supervisor Niehoff,
Here.
Supervisor Morehouse,
Here.
Supervisor Kennedy,
Here.
Supervisor Tripp,
Here.
Supervisor Prochnow,
Here.
Supervisor Jensen,
Here.
Supervisor Larry Bjork,
Here.
Supervisor Bauer,
Here.
Supervisor Leno,
Here.
Supervisor Hartung,
Here.
All right, thank you. Approval of the minutes. Anybody had a chance to look at the minutes? Would like to make a motion?
I so move.
Supervisor Steen moves.
I'll second.
Supervisor Headland seconds. Any discussion on the minutes? If not, all in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Supervisor Bjork, you had a
Yeah.
question?
Yes, would you introduce our stand-in clerk tonight, or?
Oh, I am sorry. This is Christine Solz. She's our interim clerk. She's worked in the office many years. I don't know how long. 6.5 years. Very qualified. And so if she makes a mistake, don't be too hard on her. It's her first night. I'm sorry. Thank you for mentioning that. Let's see. Presentation of petitions, memorials, and other communications. The only thing we have is a retirement of county employees. Keith Grimm for 24 years. Yes, we did, right before.
Okay.
Question was whether we voted on the minutes. We did right before
That's right.
Larry's question.
Time before, yeah.
All right. So anyway, Keith, what division or department was Keith retiring from?
I believe it was Highway, Public Works.
Okay. I did not know him, so.
No, he was one of
Boy.
my corrections officers.
I apologize,
Oh.
Sheriff. As I said that, I went, wait a minute. You're of course you're correct. One of the corrections.
All right. Well, like all the rest of our employees that have been here so long, we've lost a awful lot of experience with Keith, and we appreciate all the service he's done for Dunn County. Public comments. Krista, have we gotten any since the start of the meeting?
There are no public comments.
Okay, thank you. Appointments. You've gotten an appointment sheet that Christine sent out. It's ADRC Advisory Committee. Appoint to succeed Jan Pescha, Heather Jury. And to appoint to succeed Jane Weber, Sherry Homestead. And reappoint Margie Hagman. And reappoint Maria Budkowski. On the Ethics Inquiry Board, reappoint Richard Johnson. And on the Zoning Board of Adjustment, appoint to fill the unexpired term of Lisa Bragg Holbert, Patrick McCoy, and then appoint to fill the unexpired term of Patrick McCoy as alternate 1, Barbara Lyon will take that place, and then to appoint the unexpired term of Barbara Lyon as alternate 2, Gerald Porter will take that place. I need a motion for this. These need board confirmation.
Mr. Chairman,
Supervisor Morehouse moves. Supervisor Steen seconds. Any discussion? If not, all in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. Now we'll go to the report of our county manager, starting with COVID-19 update, please.
Thank you. As of Monday, we've had a total number of 4,549 confirmed cases of the virus among Dunn County residents. There's another 391 probable cases. Those will be cases that weren't with the definitive PCR test, but were either symptomatic or positive by an antigen test. The good news is, again, as of the beginning of this week, we have administered over 24,000 doses of the vaccine for Dunn County residents. The number of people who have completed their series for vaccine is 9,884, which is just under 22% of the population. The cautionary news is at least our health department is currently having to decline offered doses because not enough people are setting up appointments. We're afraid that, and we're hearing this around the country, that we may now be entering a phase where we're encountering more people who are reluctant to be vaccinated. I would simply encourage everybody who has gotten the vaccine to encourage anybody they know who has not to do so. As of Monday, everybody in the United States age 16 and over is eligible, and there are plenty of vaccine to go around. So please encourage everybody. The only way we're going to get back to pre-pandemic activities is if we reach herd immunity. That means 75 to 80% of our population being vaccinated. So please encourage everybody else to do so if you know any who have not. That's the COVID-19 update. I don't know if Supervisor Morehouse, as chair, has anything to add from Health and Human Services Board. Looks like not. Okay. Any questions?
I have a question.
Supervisor Briard.
Questions, Gary? I've been looking at the paper and the TV where Dunn County has some of the lowest rates of citizens being vaccinated. And my question is, In February, my wife and I went to Chippewa County to get vaccinated. And both times we were there were numerous people from Dunn County also in Chippewa County getting the vaccine. How are they counted? Is it counted as Chippewa County's citizens being vaccinated, or is it counted as Dunn County citizens being vaccinated?
They are counted as Dunn County citizens being vaccinated. It's not where you get the vaccine, it's where you reside that is counted.
Okay, thank you.
Supervisor Larry Bjork.
These Bjorks must think alike because that was my same question. I had mine done in Eau Claire.
Okay. All right. Any other questions? I see none. Go ahead and move on, Mr. Miller.
Okay, in your packets, you have the purchase orders over $40,000. Hopefully they're fairly self-explanatory. I will note that the ones that are earmarked for administration, principal and interest, debt service, and then the payments on the bonds are all annual payments, scheduled payments for those debts. We've got mining equipment and a payment on a loan for vehicles from the highway department. So if there are any questions on any of the purchase orders over 40,000.
Mr. Chair, I have a question.
Supervisor Lino.
I was just noticing that $823,000 payment on the 2019 general obligation bonds. And I was just wondering, is that a typo? Because it looks like it may be. Keith?
Yeah, I would defer to Keith on that one.
Yeah.
I know that Keith is with us, whether or not he's actually paying attention. There he is.
I am technical difficulties. Sorry about that, folks. I'm bringing up I'm multitasking and failing at it. I'm looking at the debt payment schedule, and yes, that is the March 1st or April 1st, 2021 scheduled debt service payment. Principal is $745,000. Interest says $78,581. So
Okay.
that is correct.
Thank you.
And then one other question relating to that, the $1.3 million payment, does that pay that one off?
No, if you're talking for the 2012A, which would be for the neighbors construction, no, that is the scheduled annual payment, or I'm sorry, semi-annual payment. April 1st, 2021, it's $1,035,000 in principal and $306,225 in print or interest. The annual total debt service on the neighbors scheduled through October 32 is approximately $1.6 million annually.
Okay.
That was a 20-year bond.
I was hoping.
Yep.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none, you want to report on the county treasurer, county clerk?
So you've seen in your materials that we have a recommendation from the Committee on Administration for county treasurer. We'll take that up later tonight. What I can tell you on the county clerk search, we have scheduled tomorrow interviews in front of the Committee on Administration starting at noon. We have 4 candidates where we hope to interview tomorrow. And if all goes well and we end up recommending one, that one will be scheduled for appointment with the agreement of the full county board at the May meeting.
Any questions on that? If not, we'll move on to number 9, reports of departments, emergency communication, emergency management, and the sheriff and the libraries. They've all been in your packet. I know at least the sheriff is here for any questions. Are there any questions on any of the reports? Well, I have one for the sheriff. Under the canine incidents for 2020 is 0. And it was running fairly good. So did we not have a canine at that time, or?
No, we've got technically 3 of them. That those canine incidents got kind of jumbled up with our new software system, our RMS system, so we couldn't get a true and accurate count. So I just left that blank this year.
Okay.
They're coded a different way, and they're kind of roped in. Instead of creating 2 separate incidents, say the canines are used at a domestic, we don't want to create a separate incident to look like we're padding numbers or something. So we leave it labeled as a domestic dispute instead of creating a separate case for canines. So they kind of got roped into the original case heading instead of a separate case title this year.
All right, thank you. I was pretty sure we had canines, and I thought maybe I was wrong, but thank you for the explanation. Any other questions before we move on from the reports? Supervisor Gary Bjork.
For the sheriff, being what's going on with all these trials up in the cities and that, have you changed any way that you interact with the public, or is it similar, or just more education, or what have you done or not done, being that of this atmosphere that we have?
Well, no, COVID's probably changed the way we interact with the public more than anything else going on. You know, Wisconsin kind of leads the nation in its policies, tactics, and use of force stuff. You know, you can certainly see what's going on in Madison, some legislation that's being presented and stuff. But the reality is we're kind of the trendsetter on the you know, high standards that we have in the state of Wisconsin. So, you know, the stuff that they're proposing is stuff that Wisconsin already does. So we really haven't had to change much on our end. Like I say, COVID's probably been more of an impact on how we interact with the public than anything.
Thank you.
Supervisor Larry Bjork.
Yeah, I have a question for the sheriff, and I was just wondering, in this day and age, as far as recruits that come to Dunn County, are they pretty much all from tech school in Eau Claire, or where do our recruits come from prior to employment in Dunn County?
We've got, looking at my staff, I would say probably the bulk of them come through CVTC training program in Eau Claire. We've got some that have went to the 4-year program in Platteville, some to the 4-year university in Eau Claire. But probably 90% of my staff is from, you know, St. Croix, Dunn, Eau Claire, Pepin counties is where they grew up and attended school. Most of them attended school in Eau Claire, either at the university or CVTC.
Supervisor Larry Bjork, follow up.
One more time. The 4-year degree program recruits that you get, what's their majors? Is it criminal, or what is it called that prepares a person to be hired for Dunn County?
It's a criminal justice program for the most part is what we see. We see there's a few that you know, have psychology degrees. I have a deputy that has a master's degree in public business or public management from Hamline University. So you know, it's a variety, but the bulk of them are a criminal justice program.
Thank you.
And any other questions?
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Supervisor Story.
Sheriff, wondering 2 questions. Number one, would you attribute any of your stats to COVID in terms of a decline or an increase? That would be number 1 question.
Oh, I was waiting for the second. Sorry.
Oh, you want the second now too?
I'll answer the first one.
All right.
Yes, we. If you look at our total numbers, we were down 2,000 in some cases. So yes, there's definitely officer generated complaints were down. Our traffic stops alone took up a bulk of the number of total cases we were down in a year, just because, if I don't want to say we did back off on public contacts, and some of those public contacts are traffic stops and traffic enforcement. So it certainly did affect the number of cases we had in the year.
But in terms of crime related to incomes being down, any kind of crime where they needed to steal something, or there was something financial or bad checks or anything like that, did you notice that there was an increase in any of that kind of thing, really?
Yeah, you'll see in the packet that our burglaries and thefts were up fairly significantly, but I also, can tie that to kind of a little, I don't want to say lack of drug enforcement, but very aggressive drug enforcement. We'll see rise in property crimes if we're not very active in our drug enforcement. Burglaries, thefts, and methamphetamines go hand in hand. And over the last year, the meth prices, the last 2 years, the meth prices have been climbing because it's been difficult to get it into the country. But we're starting to see a decrease in cost of meth on the street now. So it's becoming easier to get their hands on, which in turn causes less burglaries and thefts.
Okay. Well, and you actually did touch on my other question, and that was related to traffic stops. I wondered if that was attributed to less staff or too many duties so that staff didn't have time to do that. And apparently it was just that basically you answered that. So that was my other question.
Yeah, they were pretty much told, to egregious violations obviously need contact, but, to avoid contact, person-to-person contact during the peak of COVID, we really kind of backed off our traffic enforcement and didn't want them out there having unnecessary contact with being potentially exposed. We were down on staff. I mean, it seems like, Lord, now it seems like 75% of my staff have either had COVID or were quarantined because of family members or something along that line. So we're really working on a skeleton crew right now. I've got some officer injuries and we've got some people out with COVID exposures and things like that. So staffing the patrol schedule for the next month or two is definitely going to be a challenge. When you have 14 patrol deputies and you've lost 4 of them to either COVID or work comp injuries, things like that, I think it's kind of sketchy.
Thank you, Sheriff. Great job.
Any other questions?
I have a question, Chairman Bartlett, Supervisor Calabrese.
Right, Supervisor Calabrese, go ahead.
Also for the sheriff. I read in the packet that the canine therapy dog program, which seems wonderful, is entirely funded by donations. And I'm wondering how those are solicited. Are there events? And I'm sure there haven't been many events available for the last year. Is there some place people can go to make donations for that program?
Yeah, we take donations to our canine fund anytime. If people reach out to us and want to make a contribution, they could certainly write a check to us and write canine donations in the memo. But we had a large fundraiser when we went to add our second patrol dog. And we had some monies left over from that. Culver's was very helpful in kind of being a cheerleader for us, sending letters out and offering free custard to other businesses that made donations to our canine fund. And Menominee Lions Club donated $15,000 themselves to that fund. So we haven't had to solicit recently. We're kind of using leftover funds, but there was a couple. Those are the 2 big ones that I think we raised nearly right around $30,000.
Oh, great. Thank you.
Any other questions? All right, I'll mention it again tonight that on my screen, I can only see a portion of the attendees. So if somebody has a question, don't be afraid to speak up if I don't see your hand come up. All right, hearing none. We will move on to number 10, consideration of resolutions, reports, ordinances from the standing committees. And thank you, Sheriff, for being here for all those questions. Moving on to 10A from the Executive Committee, a resolution approving the FY 2021 budget adjustments for UW-Madison Extension and Human Services Department. I need a motion for this.
Mr. Chairman, I so move to approve.
Supervisor Anderson moves, Supervisor Steen seconds. Quite a bit of information there on the backgrounds and stuff. Is there any questions? Anybody? We've got our Chief Financial Officer here tonight to answer any questions if there are. I see no questions. All right. This is a roll call vote because it's a budget adjustment. So we'll have the clerk take the roll.
Supervisor Vandermeulen,
Yes.
Vandermeulen recorded as yes. Supervisor Vogel,
Yes.
Supervisor Vogel recorded as yes. Supervisor Zons,
Yes.
Supervisor Zons recorded as yes. Supervisor Anderson,
Yes.
Supervisor Anderson recorded as yes. Supervisor Bauer,
Yes.
Supervisor Bauer recorded as yes. Supervisor Gary Bjork,
Yes.
Supervisor Gary Bjork recorded as yes. Supervisor Larry Bjork,
Yes.
Supervisor Larry Bjork recorded as yes. Supervisor Calabrese,
Yes.
Supervisor Calabrese recorded as yes. Supervisor Hartung,
Yes.
Supervisor Hartung recorded as yes. Supervisor Headland,
Yes.
Supervisor Headland recorded as yes. Supervisor Jensen,
Yes.
Supervisor Jensen recorded as yes. Supervisor Johnson,
Yes.
Supervisor Johnson recorded as yes. Supervisor Kennedy,
Yes.
Supervisor Kennedy recorded as yes. Supervisor Kinnear,
Yes.
Supervisor Kinnear recorded as yes. Supervisor Crumry,
Yes.
Supervisor Crumry reported as yes. Supervisor Keeter,
Yes.
Supervisor Keeter recorded as yes. Supervisor Leno,
Yes.
Supervisor Leno recorded as yes. Supervisor Maves,
Yes.
Supervisor Maves recorded as yes. Supervisor McCullough,
Yes.
Supervisor McCullough recorded as yes. Supervisor Morehouse,
Yes.
Supervisor Morehouse recorded as yes. Supervisor Niehoff,
Yes.
Supervisor Niehoff recorded as yes. Supervisor Prochnow,
Yes.
Supervisor Prochnow recorded as yes. Supervisor Quinn,
Yes.
Supervisor Quinn recorded as yes. Supervisor Rogers,
Yes.
Supervisor Roger recorded as yes. Supervisor Score,
Yes.
Supervisor Score recorded as yes. Supervisor Steen, Supervisor Steen,
Yes.
Supervisor Steen recorded as yes. Supervisor Story,
Yes.
Supervisor Story recorded as yes. Supervisor Tripp,
Yes.
Supervisor Tripp recorded as yes. And Chairman Bartlett,
Yes.
Supervisor Bartlett recorded as yes.
All right. Resolution passes. Moving on to resolution or A2 resolution adopting the 2022 through 2026 capital improvement plan. Speaking to this is County Manager, Mr. Miller.
Thank you. As you will recall, the executive committee and then the full county board in February and March discussed the idea of adopting a 5-year capital improvement plan, which would incorporate a policy for financing capital improvements. It would gather the projected needed capital improvements over a 5-year period, and then be adopted on an annual basis, where each year we would push out an additional year and focus in particular on approved capital projects for the next fiscal year. That is the plan that's in front of the county board tonight. It features a proposal for not more than $3 million in borrowing for these capital improvements. Capital improvements include things like repairs to buildings. We need to address leaky roofs, for instance, at the Judicial Center, a new radio tower. Attached to the resolution is a list, not only of all of the projects identified by the managers of the various departments of the county, but also those that have been earmarked for inclusion in the fiscal year 22 budget, with projecting the others to go out in the subsequent years 23 through 26. It's important to note a few things about this. Number one, you'll notice that the projection does include a continuation of the county's vehicle registration fee. That is not a foregone conclusion that that will happen. The county board will be taking up whether or not to continue the vehicle registration fee, starting with the highway committee in July. It is also important to note that this is a plan. It's intended to be to give guidance. It's intended to be incorporated as part of the fiscal year 22 budget. But should situations change, it may merit some changes even to what's shown in this. A plan is a guide. It is not written in stone. So it allows us the flexibility to adapt should conditions change prior to the adoption of each annual budget at the end of each year. And a 5-year plan also allows us to adapt and to change to real life conditions as the years go by. But the point of this plan is it smooths out the volatility that we've experienced in the past, where some years we have to borrow considerably and other years we don't borrow at all. It also gives a much greater sense of what will happen with individual property owners' tax bills so that they don't experience those steep up and downs. And finally, this plan allows the county to slowly work down its total debt service. Even though we're borrowing each year, our total debt service gradually works its way down. So in light of all of that, the resolution has been forwarded by the executive committee for adoption by the county board.
Any questions? Supervisor Lino.
No questions on this.
All right. I saw your hand go up, so I thought, sorry. No other questions?
Supervisor Bauer here.
Okay, Supervisor Bauer, go ahead.
Sorry, Mr. Chair. Just a question on the registration fees. Does that go into the general fund in the highway, or does that just go into the building fund as well?
No, that's specific to highway, and it's specifically must be used for roads projects.
And it has to be over, we can't use it in place of our levy. So we have to levy as much as we did the first year we put it in place.
And in fact, that's an important fact to highlight, because I have heard even from members of the public some suspicion that that's not the case. The county is not allowed to lower its levy dedicated to road construction as a consequence of the vehicle registration fee. The vehicle registration fee is in addition to that base amount.
Any other questions? I don't see any or hear any, so we will vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Did we actually have a motion on that?
Oh, I'm sorry. We did?
Because I think we went straight to discussion. So I would move. that
I
we
am
adopt
sorry.
it.
We need a motion. Supervisor McCullough moves. Supervisor Headland seconds. I got ahead of myself. I'm very sorry. Now we can vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried. All right, 10A3, resolution proclaiming April 28th, 2021 as Workers' Memorial Day in Dunn County. I need a motion on this.
I move just to accept.
Supervisor Kelly moves, Supervisor Quinn seconds. Any speaking to this? We try to do this every year. We have done this every year. If not, all in favor, say aye.
I'd like to
Oh,
speak on it.
okay.
This has been a long-standing thing through Dunn County and all over the state of Wisconsin through the AFL-CIO. So it's not something that's new. It's something we do every year, and I'm glad we do it. So thank you.
All right. Anything else? If not, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Moving on to 10A4, resolution condemning violence against Asian Pacific Islander American community. I need a motion on this. Supervisor Tripp moves. Supervisor Vanderloom seconds. Speaking to this, Supervisor Tripp.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think all of you received the email a couple of days ago that reflected a letter from one of our Hmong citizens of Dunn County. And the fact that any individual has to undergo the kind of mistreatment, harassment, and in some cases downright personal crimes against them is really unfortunate. And it occurred to me as I was thinking about this earlier this evening, these folks that are suffering these indignities are our friends and neighbors. And the people committing the indignities are our friends and neighbors. It's time for us to speak up. I looked at the paper briefly, or the headlines. Overall in the United States in 2020, hate crimes actually decreased a little bit, but hate crimes against Asian Americans increased by 150%. It's time. This is a timely resolution. And I not only encourage you to vote for this, but I encourage you to think about what we can do as individuals and as a county board to promote a little bit gentler, kinder society in which we can all live. Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else from anyone?
I got a question, Mr. Chair.
Supervisor Bauer, go ahead.
I agree with everything that Mr. Tripp said, Supervisor Tripp. But why stop there? I mean, next month or next year, it might be Native Americans, might be Latinos, or maybe the Amish. So can't we just do one that covers all of them, or do we have to do individual every time it comes up?
Supervisor Tripp, go ahead.
If I could respond, thank you, Mr. Chair. I think now it's a good time to specifically cite the attacks on Asian Americans. They have been subject to an increase, as I indicated. Hate crimes overall are down, but hate crimes against Asian Americans are up by 150%. There will be other times, and I'm sure, when we would like to address other specific groups, perhaps. But Supervisor Bauer, I have to say, I really appreciate the sentiment, and I agree with it. We ought to not isolate our thoughts or comments about one group of people or another. Maybe it's time that, I'll start with myself. I start looking at people as
as fellow human beings and try to be a little bit more positive in my interactions with them. So I do appreciate your comment. Thank you.
Any other questions? Supervisor Larry Bjork.
Well, I agree with Tripp, but I cannot support the resolution. And the reason it is because I think if any group are our neighbors, friends and neighbors, and if the people that are discriminating against those people are our friends and neighbors, then I think we have a greater responsibility than just passing a resolution with the county board. We need to look into ourselves, and if we witness something like that, we need to speak up. And I guess I've kind of had my role as a county board supervisor to make decisions on things that I have knowledge about. And I got to tell you, I've never witnessed, I've never heard, I've never felt, I've never known anyone who has discriminated against Asian Americans. I've worked with Asian Americans at Walmart. I go to cardiac rehab twice a week, and it's me and an Asian lady with an interpreter, and by golly, we both work our butts off. And it never occurs to me that there should be some reason why there should be any reason that her heart works any different than mine. So I can't support the resolutions because I think it's kind of a cop-out that now we've done it and now things are going to be better. When I first started driving for Walmart, they were turning down hundreds of applications. And all you had to do was go to the CB radio on channel 19 and you'd hear what people had to think about Walmart drivers because someone didn't get hired there. And it's the nastiness that people have when they feel they are immune to identification. Right back to where I started from, you hear something, you see something, you say something, and I just can't support the resolution. I think it's the cheap way out. Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Supervisor Story.
I guess I'm very disappointed in Mr. Bjork for his way of thinking because, you know, I thought about this long and hard and I actually get really angry when I think about it because for years, whether you've been somebody wearing glasses, whether you're fat, whether you're skinny, whether you're black, whether you're white, whether you're dumb or smart or mentally ill or somehow disabled, we all target or have been targeted by individuals in our lifetime. Every single one of us, if we really think about it, in some way by someone who bullied us or treated us badly, or even worse, did hurt us. The fact that there was a letter, that there was someone out there that did come forward and say that it has happened to them, I think is saying that it has happened, whether, you know, we have seen it personally or not. I guess I don't choose to ignore that. And that's what I guess I would say I'm disappointed about. It's like denying that it's actually happening. And even though I agree with Mr. Bauer and the others that have said that we need to stand up and we need to look at all individuals, as Americans, regardless of what you look like, sound like, what race you are, whatever it is, we need to do that. And whether we say yes or no to this resolution, that is what we need to do. But it is a start to say yes to this resolution. And I guess I would encourage Supervisor Bjork to maybe change his mind. Thank you.
I am very confident in my opinion. Thank you.
Any other speaking? Excuse me.
Chairman Bartlett, Supervisor.
Yes, Supervisor Calabrese, go ahead.
I was pleased to hear Supervisor Bjork's comments, not because I agree with your planned vote, but because, in fact, I think your comments prove why we should vote for this resolution. Because you, as a citizen of Dunn County, like many other citizens of Dunn County, don't see and are not aware of this discrimination. The 150% increase that Supervisor Tripp mentioned is not in Dunn County. It's across the country. And so if you talk to your neighbors and friends about the increase in Asian American discrimination and abuse, many of them would be like you, Supervisor Bjork, and not have seen it, not have witnessed it, and not know what we're talking about. And so as community leaders, there's nothing in this resolution that says voting for it means that you forego any other work or forego doing anything further to help the Asian American community. It's a start. And so as community leaders, the hope is that news of this resolution, and in fact, we can each tell our friends and family that we voted on it, starts to spread. And then people might ask the question, why is the Dunn County Board of Supervisors voting on this resolution? I don't see any Asian American hate in Dunn County. And then people might look into it. They might find the roots of it. They might see that it's increased because of the discrimination based on the COVID epidemic and blaming people of Asian descent. And it will open eyes. And so it's just a start. And it's not a cop-out, as you say, I don't believe. And so I think it's just a good starting point. So, thank you.
Thank you. Any other speaking to this resolution?
Yeah, I do.
Supervisor Jens.
Yeah, I believe that voting on this tonight brings awareness to the people that's listening, and eventually it goes through the community, and it gets people aware of what's going on around them, and they're looking at what's going on around them more. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. Any other speaking? Supervisor Neal.
Yeah, I've been listening to all the comments and talking about it, and I don't think Supervisor Bjork is necessarily against this resolution. I think what it is that what does this resolution actually do? And Supervisor Jensen and Calabrese came up and said, yes, it gives people awareness that the issue is out there. But I think the bigger issue that people are talking about and that I've heard is that there's hate out there all over. Whether you hate your employer, Walmart, for not hiring you, or whether you hate your neighbor as an Asian American because of the COVID-19 pandemic and you blame them, hate is something that needs to go away entirely. I mean, the way that I view everybody is whether I don't care whether you're black, brown, yellow, blue, gray, pink. It doesn't matter to me. We are all presents from God. We just have different wrapping paper on. And I think
that's a good way to put it.
But we need to condemn hate in general, and not just necessarily hate. And if this is one step that we can take, to make people aware, we can do that. And I do support this, but I also think that what does it do for the Asian American other than something on a piece of paper? Do we need to go, is there something we can do that can go further and as county officials, I know we can't make laws that make this a crime punishable by prison or something like that. So I guess I see it from multiple angles here. So I just wanted to share my 2 cents.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Mr. Chairman.
Supervisor Morehouse.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will just respond to Supervisor Niehoff. I suggested when we reviewed this in executive committee that that our county staff do all that they can do to make sure that this is well publicized in the community, and that brings everybody's points about awareness, feelings of support among our Asian American and Pacific Islander neighbors, awareness among people who harbor ill thoughts. So the more publicity that can be brought to this, the greater its impact, I believe.
Thank you. Any other speaking?
I would have one more thing to say.
Okay, Supervisor Jensen.
Is I believe that tonight was a good conversation on this subject, and it will probably be written in some of the papers around that will bring awareness to this and a lot of other hate crime. So I think it will be a good evening on this topic that had discussed this well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other discussion?
Mr. Chair, one more thing.
Supervisor Story.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The only thing I would end with is that it definitely means, as leaders in this community, that we are on notice. We are leaders, and it starts with us. We have to be the face, the people out there that are also showing that we don't hate, whatever the reason is for. So let's just maybe keep that in mind again, that we are examples to this community. And if we do see something, we need to, I think, get involved. So thank you.
All right, thank you. Any other speaking? If not, all in favor of this resolution, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Resolution passes. Moving on to 10A5, resolution declaring official intent under reimbursement bond regulations. Speaking to this.
I will, Mr. Chair.
All right, our Chief Financial Officer, Mr. Stry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This resolution is presented to the county board tonight after presentation to executive committee last night. And it's part of taking a proactive approach to protect and maintain our option to go to market for the budgeted borrowing for 2021. If you recall, in the budget, there was approximately $1.35 million included in there for borrowing. And at the present time, we're working with our municipal advisor to evaluate options to determine what's in the best interests of the county, both short and long term. I can tell you we're looking at 2 potential refinancings that might be coming forward for as a potential. And with that being the case, we felt it was prudent to bring this forward. Part of the rationale behind that is under IRS rules for if you issue general obligation bonds, you can only reimburse for projects going back approximately 60 days. So if you're starting construction projects, if you're purchasing equipment, you've only got 60 days with the exception of certain things like soft costs for architectural. So this preserves our ability to issue debt later in the year if we choose to go to market and still be able to reimburse the county. So this really is does not obligate the county to do anything, but it does preserve our opportunity to go to market and not have any reimbursement issues. So that's the general intent on this resolution. It was reviewed by executive committee last week and recommended for your approval.
Any questions? Speaking to or against? Supervisor McCullough.
Move to adopt the resolution as presented.
All right. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Supervisor Lino seconds. Any other speaking? If not, all in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carried. Moving on to 10B. From the Health and Human Services Board, ordinance repealing and recreating the Dunn County Fair Housing Ordinance. This is a first reading. Can I have a motion for this? Supervisor Morehouse moves. Supervisor Steen seconds. Discussion.
Mr. Chairman.
Supervisor Morehouse.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This ordinance and 2 other items are all related to a CDBG grant. essentially already awarded to the county and which this board has acted on. However, we aren't able to utilize the CDBG funds unless some administrative actions are taken by the county board. This fair housing ordinance is the first of those. It was in place in 1997, but its statutory references are outdated. And so it has been updated to bring those citations currently. It's essentially an administrative change.
Any other speaking questions? Supervisor Steen.
Yes, Supervisor Morehouse, were we going to consider doing away with the first and second reading and doing it all at once?
Yes, Supervisor Steen, I was hoping to do that.
I was going to ask that. So we would need a motion to do that before we vote on this resolution.
Oh, okay. All right, I would move that we waive the second reading on this, particularly since these are not substantive changes, but administrative.
I would second.
Supervisor Steen seconds. Any questions or speaking on moving?
I have a question.
Yes, Supervisor Rogers.
So I was like last month, I struggle when we bypass the standard rules. Is there any reason that it can't come back next month and be approved next month? Is there any urgency that it has to be done this month?
The grant money will be available before next month. So this money is going to be used for housing, temporary housing for individuals that do not have a place to live. And having the money a month earlier would be able to help more individuals. Now, maybe Supervisor Morehouse has more to add. Go ahead, Supervisor Morehouse.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Supervisor Rogers, the grant award letter has in fact already arrived. So the funds are waiting for what is essentially a change in the numbers of statutes cited in the ordinance. It is not a substantive change. So speeding up our ability to use the money means, as Chairman Bartlett has just indicated, that we will be able to begin providing services that are important and necessary in the community. It hasn't introduced any kind of substantive change to an ordinance that's been in place since 1997.
Thank you.
Any other questions before we vote on suspending the rules for the second reading? I see none. This is a 2/3 vote. Has to be a 2/3 majority. So all in favor of suspending the rules for the second reading, say aye.
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 And opposed, same sign. All right. Suspending the rules passed. So now going back to the original question, is there any other speaking or questions on the original resolution? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Resolution ordinance passes. All right, moving on to B2, resolution for cdbg citizen participation plan amendment. Need a motion for this. Supervisor Morehouse moves, Supervisor Steen seconds. Supervisor Morehouse, do you want to speak to this or?
Yes, thank you, Mr.
Okay.
Chairman. Very, very briefly, the Health and Human Services Board has approved this, and this board has approved it. It came back to us with one recommended change, one line, in fact, that the Citizen Participation Committee that governs, that will be engaged in the CDBG grant must include at least one member who is low to moderate income. That's the only change.
Any questions, speaking for or against? If not, all in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Resolution passes. Moving on to B3. 10B3. Resolution to adopt a residential anti-displacement and relocation assistance plan for CDBG programs. I need a motion. Supervisor Morehouse moves, Supervisor Steen seconds. Speaking to this.
And again, Mr. Chairman, very briefly, this is a residential anti-displacement and relocation assistance plan, which is hard to say fast. That too has been in place since 1997, but a number of the requirements for the anti-displacement and relocation plan have been changed. So it has been updated, and it was approved by the Health and Human Services Board.
Any questions? Supervisor Tripp.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Supervisor Morehouse, could you outline what any significant changes, if the changes to that plan were significant, or can you give us some idea of the nature of the changes that needed to be made?
If with the chairman's permission, Chris Corpola is with us. She has more specific knowledge of the changes are not substantive, but she has more knowledge than I.
If that's okay with the board, we'll hear from Chris Corpola on that. Chris, if you're with us, go ahead.
I am with you.
All right.
Unfortunately, I don't know an answer to that question. Sorry. So what happened was we submitted the it's called RAD-RAP plan that was approved in 1997, and then the Department of Administration came back and said it didn't have what we needed and suggested that we adopt the sample plan that they had provided. And so after vetting that through Corporation Council, that's what we went with, but I did not compare them side by side to be able to tell you what is different about them.
Mr. Chair?
Supervisor Tripp.
Can we assume then that the changes were not significant policy changes?
I think that's a fair assumption. I know that in the ordinance change, they were largely statutory. Occasionally there's a language change or a slight change to the rule, but I don't believe that there was anything, because honestly, I did look at it back at the beginning and did not see that there were any. I thought that our plan fit with what needed to be in the plan when I kind of looked at them side by side back at the start, but I didn't go through them line by line by line. I just thought, oh, this looks like this is pretty much what they're asking for, but it wasn't quite what they were asking for.
Corporation Council, do you have anything to add?
No, I don't. But that was my understanding as well, is that the some aspects of the plan needed to be updated. And this resolution is just to approve the updated version of it.
If I can make one more comment, not to take lightly the issue of creating and approving a plan. But the primary piece, in fact, I had asked for clarification from the Department of Administration as to whether we even needed to have this plan in place, because our project doesn't involve the demolition of or displacement, a demolition of existing structures or displacement of any persons. And that whole red wrap process is really about if you are doing construction and you're going to you're going to move people out of perhaps like low or middle income housing, and then that you have appropriate plans in place as to where you're going to put them. And so I had I said, do we even need this? And they said, yeah, you do, because it's a CDBG requirement. But it's a bit of a moot point to the project that we're currently working on.
Any other discussion? All in favor, say aye then.
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Resolution passes. Moving on to 10C from the Planning Resource Development Committee, a resolution authorizing an application for target runoff management grant from the Department of Natural Resources. I need a motion. Supervisor Quinn moves.
I'll second it.
Supervisor Anderson, was that you?
Yes.
All right, okay. Speaking to this resolution, Supervisor Quinn.
Just briefly, this resolution and the one after it are related. As you can tell from the comments below, for the last year, during the last year, the Land and Water Conservation Division has been working with a farm in Dunn County that has a older manure storage unit that is failing and needs to be repaired and replaced. Very expensive proposition. And those older units, the state requires that if we require a repair or renovation, that we have to provide matching funds. It's a very expensive project. The Department of Natural Resources has this special fund, one of several sources that are available for matching funds for that kind of project. So this resolution authorizes the division to apply for those funds, administer them appropriately, establish partnerships with appropriate agencies and other counties and the landowner, and complete the project.
That's good.
Any questions? If not, all in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Opposed? Motion carried. Moving on to 10C2, resolution authorized participation and government responsibility in the Department of Natural Resources Targeted Runoff Management Grant Program. I need a motion for this. Supervisor Quinn moves.
I'll second it.
Supervisor Anderson seconds. Speaking to this resolution, Supervisor Quinn again.
So this resolution basically authorizes the division to apply, the county and the division to apply to be eligible to participate in the targeted runoff program. It's a formality we have to go through in order to qualify for that grant that we just authorized earlier.
All right, thank you. Any questions? If not, all in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Resolution passes. All right, moving on to 10D1 from the Committee on Administration, an ordinance amending the County Code of Ordinances, Chapter 5. This is the first reading. I need a motion for this.
So moved, Tim Leno.
Supervisor Leno moves, Supervisor Headland seconds. Speaking to this, Supervisor Headland?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. This is amending a current ordinance, as you mentioned. And there are really two parts of this that are included in the packet. The first part that is going to be amended is under 5.1.6 budget preparation and execution. And if you note that under section D, in the original draft or passing of this, we listed the anti-budget for person to handle would be the administrative coordinator. Well, we don't have an administrative coordinator, we have a county manager. And so we're asking to change that language from administrative coordinator to county manager. Then and down in the main part of the ordinance, under the county manager shall, it talks about the county manager being able to appoint people or hire people for department managers and department hires, except for those people who are elected. And those are statutory positions: treasurer, clerk, register of deeds. And so the original ordinance said that any of those appointments that could be directed by the county manager themselves would need to come before the board before they could be approved. And yet we put it on the county manager to be able to maintain these people and then or dismiss them if he sees fit. So it seemed pertinent to eliminate that part, because sometimes we end up with a department having no administrator for maybe as much as 6-8 weeks by the time people were interviewed and then a candidate chosen, and then we'd gone past the board meeting that month and we'd have to go on to the next one and so forth. So I think that that's a pertinent change, and that's the two basic changes in this ordinance that we're proposing.
Any questions?
Supervisor, can you hear Chairman Bartlett?
Supervisor Kinnear and then Supervisor Steen. Go ahead, Supervisor Kinnear.
Okay, Supervisor Headland, I'm just curious if the committee had considered, instead of required by the county board confirmation, perhaps your committee or the executive committee could have approved it. Did you consider those?
No, I can't say that we had a discussion as to that. We did have a lot of discussion as to the fact that we wanted to continue the process that is basically in place right now, where for instance, if anyone here that is chair of a committee or that committee would also participate in the hire of replacement specialty department managers. So that, for instance, we've done so in the administrative department with the hiring of an IT professional to replace our IT department manager. And so hopefully we would continue that on, where our county manager has those people who have the oversight of that department be the people who would then help choose a person that would be a good fit, as opposed to coming to, bringing all information then later on after that committee meeting and then bringing it to the county board. And then, like I say, I could really see a chance where that person, by the time we went through the whole thing, accepts another job and we start over again.
Thank you.
I guess that was my.
I lost my train of thought here now, but yeah, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Supervisor Steen, you had a question?
Yes. I guess I would speak against adopting this.
I see, I don't think that the county board should give away their authority regarding hiring and firing and that type of thing. And this seems like a step, just a step to get further away from the actual county board control. Now, Supervisor Vaughn Headland mentioned that sometimes before you could bring it to the next county board meeting, it could cause some problems, but there's nothing that says we can't have a special meeting to address these issues. I think the elected people from the county is the county board, and I would prefer to have the county board to have more of a hand or a say in what goes on.
Thank you, Mr. Steen.
Any other speaking to our Supervisor Rogers?
I would have to agree with Gary or Supervisor Steen on that. I think that the county board should still be involved in more of that and not give up all of our duties.
Any other speaking to this?
May I?
Corporation Counsel.
Thank you. Just make sure. Okay. Just to clarify, there are, in addition to the constitutional elected officers, there are positions that lie fully within the province, the hiring and firing province of the county board. This does not affect those. I'll use myself as an example. County manager supervises my work, but I was hired by the county board and my employment can only be terminated by the county board. It doesn't interfere with that. And the county board doesn't have authority to approve or fire approve termination or fire anyone, except to the extent that it might be a budgetary issue that involves elimination of a position or a proposal for elimination of a position. This proposal was drafted precisely because it's almost ceremonial. I'm not trying, that's not the right word, but it doesn't, the county manager gets hired to do all of these things, and including having the authority to terminate department heads without consulting with the committee, without consulting with the county board. And this was felt to be just an extra step that doesn't really add anything to the process. It truly was not intended to be eroding any authority of the county board. It's just an extra step in the process that doesn't, I mean, if you have a good county manager and a good interviewing team, which now, because of recently adopted policies and procedures, is going to include the chair or his or her designee of the oversight committee, by the time the appointment is made, you've already got a really well vetted candidate and a good consensus on who it should be. And that's the reason for it. It just eliminated that extra step. To cite a recent example, the child support director was hired in November or October, and through oversight, technically wasn't, her appointment wasn't affirmed by the county board until January, I think. And so it didn't, the process, the county board's involvement in the process at the confirmation stage doesn't have the same quality, the same depth as it does in the involvement that comes from the committee chairs being directly involved in interviewing and discussion and vetting candidates for positions. So just, I wanted to point that out.
Any other?
Mr. Chair, can I have a follow-up question, please? Can you hear?
Go ahead, Mr. Kinnear.
You're muted, Dave.
Is it
I am sorry.
codified or in writing, Supervisor Hidlin, that the chairs of the committees involved will be involved, or is that just something that we hope is going to occur?
No, maybe I'll switch that over to our county manager and he can.
Mr. Miller will answer that.
Yes. I appreciate it. The question, Supervisor Kinnear, did come up when this first was raised. Supervisor Tripp raised the question at administration. What are the procedures and the policies when it comes to hiring of department heads? And that's what we're talking about for this provision of the county code, is department head hirings that are not statutorily elected or otherwise reserved for decision by the full county board. And the answer staff produced and has adopted as a policy, which does it in front of with the administrative committee's oversight, a procedure that involves the chair of the standing committee that has oversight of that department, who has the discretion either to serve themselves on a selection committee or to involve the entire committee in the selection process. And recently we've done both. As Supervisor Hedlund said, when it came to the recent hire of our Chief Information Officer, Supervisor Hedlund was on the interview team. When it came to the recent hire of our county conservationist, Supervisor Quinn, as chair of Planning Resource Development, wanted the top two candidates to come in front of the entire committee. When it came to coming up with a candidate for treasurer, the entire committee on administration was involved. That seemed to satisfy the committee on administration that county board members still have an integral and important role in the hiring of department heads, and that by striking this provision, we address the issue that Supervisor Hedlund mentioned earlier about possible delays.
Any other speaking? Supervisor Neho.
I've read through this a number of times, and there's something in here that just kind of strikes me a little odd. So here it reads here, and I'll explain as I read after I get done reading it. Any department head appointed by the county manager under this paragraph may be removed at the pleasure of the county manager. I can tell you, I do not like that wording "at the pleasure." I think that should simply be changed to "by the county manager."
Are you asking, I
would like to make that amendment.
All right.
That would be a motion to amend the motion on the floor.
Which would be just to strike that one word, correct?
It may be removed. It would remove three words: "at the pleasure."
At the pleasure.
And
I would
insert
second
"by."
that motion, Mr. Chair.
All right. Yes. Right. Any speaking towards this amendment? All right. And I guess.
Mr. Chair,
Supervisor Hedlund.
would you then have our corp counsel read that last sentence with the words changed as we are going to have them amended?
Yes, we will.
Thank you.
So starting with the very last sentence following what's already in the document and shown in strike through, the sentence would read, any department head appointed by the county manager under this paragraph may be removed by the county manager. And guess while my microphone is on, board rules actually require that amendments be in writing. And so I've prepared a document showing the changes, and and I can send it to Supervisor Niehoff and have him just confirm that that is in fact what he meant, and we can get it into the record then.
Yes, that was going to be my question, if we could waive those rules with having a virtual meeting. It's pretty hard to get it in writing.
It's a small amendment, and I have it written out here, and I think as long as Supervisor Niehoff affirms that that's how he would like it read, I think it would be sufficient for meeting the requirements of the rule.
I affirm it as you read it.
Okay.
All right. Any speaking to this resolution?
To the amendment.
To the amendment of the resolution.
Surely a question.
Supervisor McCullough.
Since this is a first reading, we can amend at the first reading, but we would be voting on assuming that we adopt the amendment, we would be voting on the amended ordinance at the next board meeting, correct?
Correct. That is correct.
The proposed ordinance as amended, yes.
Yes. If we waited and amended it next meeting, we'd have to wait until the following month to adopt it. So any other questions to the amendment? If not, all in favor of the amendment, say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Supervisor Calabrese. All right, the amendment passes. Supervisor Steen, you have a question?
Yes, I would like to expand on my objection. And part of my reason for that is I think some of the board and myself, when I was a newer board member, felt that I wasn't part of making the sausage. And I think I'm interested in having more board interaction and what goes on. And I know from the administrative point of view that that's probably cumbersome. But I don't think that the goal of county government or any government should let that be a factor in how we move ahead and how we try to include more inclusion of the members that are county board members. And then my second question, or I have a question, is that am I understanding that this will not be discussed at the next meeting then?
It can be discussed at the next meeting.
All right. Thank you.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman.
Any other? Supervisor Larry Bjork.
I would like to concur with Supervisor Steen. And, I think we have found ourselves in a very hope it never happens again situation where we have board members that we've never sat down next to or had a chance to welcome them to the board. We haven't had a board meeting for them to appear at. And I can just go back to my own personal experience in that when we hired KT for her position, that, I was actively involved as a new board member in listening to the candidates. And I guess if there's been a position where you could find yourself wondering if you got the right person hired or not, being part of the hiring process, really kind of gives you an insight that you wouldn't have if you just keep limiting people that work for the county to very few people at the top. And so I support Gary Steen's opinion on that, and I find it really troubling that we need to keep limiting the people that make the decision. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Miller.
Supervisor Bjork, just to clarify, we're preserving what you just expressed as a desirable part of the process. Your involvement in the interviews for KT Gallagher, our public health director, was because the Health and Human Services Board was involved, just as we are preserving. That will continue to be the process. The amendment to the county code that's in front of you is solely a confirmation step, which actually isn't part of the interview process. There's no appearance of the candidate before the county board for questions or anything else. It's merely a perfunctory step that adds time. This proposal has nothing to do with limiting the involvement of the board and everything to do with efficiency. It was observed when this was proposed that if there came a time where the full board was dissatisfied with hires made by the county manager, their issue is not with the candidates being hired, but with the county manager. And of course, this board retains full authority to review and hire or fire the county manager.
Any other speaking at this time?
Mr. Chair, may I?
Yes, Supervisor Tripp.
Thank you. I tend to forget, and I suspect others of you forget occasionally as well, some of the things that we were taught in our initial training when we became county board supervisors. Our role is to make policy. It's the role of the staff to run the county. We make the policy, we establish the direction, and ultimately we control how that is carried out by hiring or firing the county manager and controlling the budgets. I tend to do the same thing myself, so I'm suspecting that others do as well. Sometimes we get into what might be considered management rather than policy-making positions, and we need to guard against that. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other speaking tonight on this item? I see none, so we will move on to 10D2, ordinance amending section 7.2.10 of the Code of Ordinance relating to this disposal of surplus property. This also is a first reading. I need a motion on this. Supervisor Headland moves.
I'll second.
Supervisor Lino seconds. Any speaking to this resolution?
I can, Mr. Chair.
Supervisor Headland.
Thank you, sir. Hopefully all the people have read through their packets and at least somewhat read through this amended ordinance change. And I think it's very well done. It is laying out what we would do with surplus property, and definition under A is that surplus property means obsolete, defective, or surplus personal property, motor vehicles, equipment, or supplies having a saleable value. And so there's a very good outline below that and steps that would be taken if we adopt this ordinance to dispose of those surplus properties that would best suit the county, that would give us the most return, or if in the case of just disposal, would make sure that it was disposed of properly. And I think in just reading it through, it should answer most everyone's questions. I hope it does.
Any questions or discussion on this ordinance? If not, we will take this up at our next month's meeting, along with 10DA also. They'll both be up next month. Moving on then to 10D3. Resolution appointing county treasurer. Need a motion for this?
I would make that motion, Mr. Chair.
Supervisor Story moves, Supervisor Morehouse seconds. Speaking to this resolution. Anybody? Mr. Miller?
Certainly. The Committee on Administration met earlier this month in a special meeting and conducted interviews of 3 candidates for the role of County Treasurer, vacated by Doris Meyer. Full deliberation and a unanimous consensus vote was made to recommend appointing Safia Jevni to the role of County Treasurer. Safia has been with the Finance Division of Administration for several years, working principally in finance for the Public Health Department, but comported herself very well, both in her demeanor and the knowledge that she had of the kinds of financial backgrounds and information treatment that's necessary to be successful as treasurer. Frankly, we were quite glad that she stepped up, although she leaves a vacancy at finance that we now have to scramble to try to fill. But it was a unanimous recommendation, and the county board is asked to appoint Safia Jevni as county treasurer.
Any questions? If not, all in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed,
Aye.
same side. Opposed, same sign. All right.
I will note too that Safia has been with us this entire meeting and I'll take this opportunity to extend my congratulations.
Thank you.
All right. All right. We've conducted all our business for tonight. Our next meeting date would be May 19th. Is there any other announcements? If not, I will call for adjournment. Thank you. Thank you to everybody.